The Straw Hats are officially a Yonko crew, with the 9 members being labeled as Luffy's officers and 3 of them having bounties over 1 billion. So what exactly do the post-Wano Straw Hats look like? How's the power structure changed? What future matchups will there be? And how has each member grown? That's what we're gonna be discussing today, but first off, make sure you subscribe and join the King Pirates crew so you don't miss any future videos. With that said though, let's finally get into this Straw Hat discussion, which we haven't had in a while. And the first thing I want to discuss is the Straw Hat power structure, because it's a pretty interesting topic right now. With the recent reveal of the new bounties for the Straw Hats, it's got a lot of people in their feelings, myself included. Does Oda hate Sanji? What is going on here?
My guy defeated Queen, Zoro defeated Kate. They had 1.3, like why are their bounties lower than the guys that they defeated?
It's only a game. Why you have to be mad?
Most importantly though, the bounties seem to indicate a shift in the power structure of the Straw Hats, because for the first time, another member on the crew is comparable to Zoro and Sanji, which has a lot of people believing that the monster trio is officially dead, but I beg to differ. In fact, I actually think it's clear as day that the monster trio still exists. And I'm gonna explain my reasoning for that, but first off, I just want to make clear that this has nothing to do with me potentially disliking Jinbei. I love Jinbei as a character. I'm very happy that he's officially joining. I was very hyped that he got a very high bounty. Jinbei getting 1.1 billion, that is hype. I'm excited for that. The only reason why I was a little disappointed about the bounties was not because Jinbei got a high one, I think he deserves that, but it was more so Sanji getting a lower bounty than I think he deserved, and also, once again, being the butt of the joke. Because sadly, that's been a pretty consistent thing for Sanji throughout the entire story. He's never really gotten a bounty where he's happy. Even starting in Alabasta, he was upset that he didn't get a bounty. Of course, when he finally got his bounty, they didn't have his picture. There's also the rivalry with him and Zoro and how Zoro's always ahead. And the one time Sanji actually surpassed him, they added Vinsmoke to his poster, so he still wasn't happy. So Sanji being the butt of the joke when it comes to bounties has been pretty consistent. And you might say because of that, it should be predictable, which I agree with, but it doesn't mean I like it. Because personally, at this point, I just want to see Sanji be happy with his bounty for once and not just be consistently always used as a gag. That aside though, let's actually talk about how this affects the power structure, because there's no doubt that Jinbei definitely adds a new dynamic. He's a new monster to the crew, and given his power, status, and bounty, a lot of people believe that he makes up the new monster trio where Luffy is not a part of it and he's a clear level above it. And honestly, there's many reasons to believe why this is the case. First off, this is a power structure that we've seen a lot recently with Kaido and his 3 calamities, Big Mom and her sweet commanders. A lot of the other Yonko crews have this setup where they have 3 commanders and the Yonko is just a clear level above the rest. And as of right now, after all the growth that Luffy just went through in Wano, that's the case for the Straw Hats as well. So as far as powers go, I'm definitely not gonna deny that Luffy has separated himself from the rest, because that's just what happened. And on the other hand, I'm also not gonna deny that Jinbei is definitely a monster, because throughout the raid on Onigashima, Oda has definitely subtly highlighted that Jinbei is a monster. Like at the beginning of the raid when the Straw Hats fought the Beast Pirates and Jinbei was paired up with Luffy and Zoro, or when the Straw Hats fought back against the Numbers, it was once again Luffy, Zoro, and Jinbei fighting them. On top of that, we also had Sanji and Jinbei pairing up to help Luffy get to the top of the roof. And the biggest moment to really bring everything together is the last scene that we saw in Wano with Luffy, Zoro, Sanji, and Jinbei all sitting together. So from what we've seen in Wano, it's very clear that Oda is pushing this narrative that Jinbei is not a regular crew member, he's also a monster. So for all the people that believe that the Straw Hats have this new dynamic with 3 commanders with Jinbei joining as a monster, I think it's valid. But at the same time, that doesn't mean the old dynamic of the monster trio has to die, because I also think from what we saw in Wano, it's very clear that the monster trio still exists. First off, when it came to matchups in Onigashima, it still followed the same exact monster trio structure, where Luffy fights the strongest, Zoro fights the second strongest, and Sanji fights the third strongest. So with just matchups and power levels alone, Oda still did not abandon the monster trio concept. More importantly though is how Oda highlighted the monster trio narratively, because time and time again he went out of his way to say that Zoro and Sanji were Luffy's wings. And this is where it becomes very clear that Oda still values the monster trio, because the monster trio is not just about strength. Zoro and Sanji are not just the strongest members after Luffy, they are also the leaders. Of course, this is something that Zoro has shown a lot in this story given his role as the first mate. Of course, there was the iconic moment in Water 7 where Zoro really stood his ground to make sure Luffy acts as a leader. And then we have the iconic moment in Thriller Bark where Sanji and Zoro both stood up to try to sacrifice himself for the crew, but it was still Zoro that ended up taking Luffy's pain. So as far as Zoro goes, it's very evident that he's pretty much the vice captain, but Sanji honestly fulfills the leadership role a lot on the crew as well. First off, in the entire crew, he's the only one that really goes off and does his own solo missions, someone that Luffy trusts to do that. He's also kind of like the protector of the crew, always sticking with the rest of the crew members and making sure everybody is safe. And I think it's no surprise that when the crew separated at Dressrosa, Sanji was the leader and they became the Curly Brow Pirates. And that's the thing about the Monster Trio. This dynamic is not just about their monster strength, it's also their leadership. And despite Jinbei being very capable at both of those things, it's very clear that Zoro and Sanji are in their own category as Luffy's wings. Because at the end of the day, multiple dynamics can exist within the Straw Hat power structure, and I think that's exactly what Oda is doing. He's paralleling multiple crews with the Straw Hats. The Monster Trio mirrors what Roger had with Scopper and Rayleigh. Of course, with Jinbei joining it as this new dynamic where the Straw Hats have a new monster, so they have 3 commanders similar to Big Mom and Kaido. And even with the Straw Hat crew as a whole, they've all been labeled as officers, which is very similar to the Red Hair Pirates and the Blackbeard Pirates. At the end of the day, the Straw Hat power structure has multiple layers. New outer layers will continue to get added, but that doesn't mean the inner layers have to be destroyed. And that's what makes the crew special and why they're gonna be the future Pirate King's crew. With that being said though, let's talk a little bit about future fights, because that's what really the power structures help us predict. Because looking at this new structure of the Straw Hats being officers, it's very clear that it's mirroring the Red Hair Pirates and the Blackbeard Pirates, setting up future matchups against them. As far as the Blackbeard Pirates go, the matchup against them is probably one of my most anticipated things in the story. Honestly, I think it's one of the things that I absolutely need in this final saga. If Oda skips it, I don't know if I can forgive him. I know that seems pretty extreme, but I love the Straw Hats. It's my favorite thing in the story. And we just still haven't really had those same 1v1s that we had pre-time skip ever since Enies Lobby. So the 1v1 matchups against the Blackbeard Pirates are something that I absolutely need. And looking at how the power structure is lining up, I'm very hopeful for it. The only thing that doesn't really line up right now is the fact that the Straw Hats have 9 members and Blackbeard has 10 Titanic captains. I do believe that Vivi will return eventually by Elbaf, so she could be the 10th member, but I'm not sure how much of a fight she's gonna put up. I guess it'll really depend on who the 10th Titanic captain is. It could be a newer character that's weaker, or it could be someone strong like Uruj, which I've done a video on that theory before. You can check that out right here. But yeah, there's many different ways that final matchup could go. A lot of people think it's Kuzan as well, which obviously that would be too OP, but he could also just be an ally, so that matchup is essentially voided. Either way, I do think ever since the introduction of the Blackbeard Pirates, Oda has been building up towards this final battle and 1v1s. As far as what the matchups will look like, I did a video on that before as well, so you can check that out right here. But for the time being, let's talk about another matchup which could be coming next, and that's the Red Hair Pirates. Because just like the Straw Hats, they also currently have this officer structure. And not only that, but the Red Hair Pirates have exactly 9 officers, so it perfectly lines up already. And if you want to get even deeper into the power structure, Shanks also has 3 commanders with Lucky Roo, Yasopp, and Ben Beckman. So I feel like with this matchup against the Red Hair Pirates, everything is already aligned. And especially given all the new information we found out about the Red Hair Pirates and their powers from Film Red, which I also did a video on that you can check out right here. But yeah, the Red Hair Pirates are just also unique, and I can't wait to see them in action. The Shanks tease has been going on for so long at this point, especially after the release of Film Red. I think it's about damn time that we actually go finally meet him and fight him and learn more about him. I personally still really hope that we get a Davy back fight between these two crews, because I think that could be perfect. I don't think Oda introduced the Davy back fight for nothing from Long Ring Longland, especially given its origins in Pirate Island, which is connected to Rocks and Blackbeard. So eventually it has to be relevant again. It could just be a perfect thing against the Red Hair Pirates. They could play for the Straw Hat that Luffy's supposed to return. Maybe Shanks has a road poneglyph and that could be the prize. And overall, I just think that idea would just work so well. It's a serious, legitimate test for the Straw Hats against a real Yonko crew. I know they just beat Big Mom and Kaido, but that was like a war with 2 alliances going against each other. This instead would be an individual test showing that the Straw Hats are up to par. And of course, Shanks and the Red Hair Pirates are not gonna hold back. They're gonna respect them as rivals. And this essentially would be the Straw Hat scenario of what we saw with the Roger Pirates and the Whitebeard Pirates during the Oden flashback. So yeah, out of all the future fights for the Straw Hats, this is probably the second one that I'm looking forward to the most. But besides that, we do also have the Crossgill, who I think will definitely at least get into a conflict with the Straw Hats. Of course, Zoro and Mihawk, that matchup eventually has to happen. I do want to see what Crocodile is capable of now. A Davy back fight in this scenario could work as well, given Buggy's personality. But I definitely don't see like a major scenario of 1v1s, because the just don't have enough manpower. But yeah, as far as Straw Hat matchups go, there's a lot that I'm excited for, and honestly, the reason I'm most excited is to see the individual growth for each Straw Hat. Because although we got a lot of Straw Hat fights in Wano and a lot of power-ups, and we saw what some members are capable of, it does feel like a lot of the Straw Hats are currently in this phase of growth and really like mastering their powers. For example, Sanji just unlocked his Germa genes, which allows him to be more durable and generate hotter flames, but there's probably still a lot more to his power that he still hasn't figured out. The same thing goes for Zoro, who just figured out he has Conqueror's Haki and is on the verge of becoming an absolute monster of mastering advanced Conqueror's Haki. And honestly, this applies to a lot of the Straw Hats. Nami just got Zeus and she has to get acclimated to that. Luffy with Gear 5th, Usopp who got Observation Haki back in Dressrosa and never touched it again. Clearly the Straw Hats have all grown and gotten stronger, but it does feel like they're still not quite there yet. So the next island that we go to, I think, is a great opportunity to just completely focus in on the Straw Hats and show them growing and mastering their powers, which is why I think them meeting the red hair pirates next could just be perfect. Whether it's through a regular fight or a Davy Bag fight or just straight up training, they could really have an opportunity to test their limits and learn their powers. And then after that, they could eventually move on to this major final battle against Blackbeard, some conflicts with the Cross Guild, eventually the final war against the world government. I think by the end of the story, every single Straw Hat still has another level that they're going to reach. But that's a discussion I'm gonna save for a future video, because that's gonna do it for this video. And if you made it this far, you're probably had a good time, so please drop a like for the YouTube algorithm. And I'm holding up a number between 1 to 3. If you guess it wrong, you have to like, subscribe, and watch the next video. And the answer is 3.